Today's guest speaker is Joan Soames. We've had her before and she talked about older adult driving, but this time she's going to dive deeper. And Joan is actually not from Massachusetts. She is from Minnesota and she is a nurse by trade, but she has a very interesting background in emergency nursing and paramedics and trauma. And she's just a wealth of knowledge.
Like you said, we want to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the things that our seniors can do to be safer drivers. We talked about the awareness last time, but this time it's more like, well, what can I do to be safer? And I'll put it into perspective right away. Keep in mind, everybody, that I'm 70, going to be 71 next week. So I'm right there with you. So Deb, you ready for me to go ahead and start sharing my screen? Yes. Okay, let's see if we can get this to work here a little bit. This is coming up with my geriatric computer here. It's almost as old as I am. So what we're going to do is talk a little bit about being an older driver. And I just always need to make sure that I disclose that I did get funding from the Minnesota Department of Public Safety. It's an Office of Traffic Safety. And it was actually the Minnesota Emergency Nurses Association got the grant. And I've been working on increasing older driver safety in Minnesota for the last, it's going on 5 years now. And some of this learning has been the output of the result of that. So last time we talked a little bit about what driving required as far as physical ability and cognitive ability. And today what we're going to talk a little bit more about is how you can make sure that those things are better. So we'll talk a little bit about like exercises and mental exercises. And then we'll also talk a little bit about driving things that we can do. I'll put it into perspective again, just reminding you not only does it take these things to drive adequately, but unfortunately, as we age, some of these things, our strength and flexibility and our ability to process information slows down a little bit. So we need to not just give up the keys, but we need to think about how are we going to respond to that and how are we going to make sure that we're safer. Some of the clues that we need to start doing these things is just simply looking at how we're driving. And what we have seen through studies is that as we age, there are changes in how we drive, how we're overwhelmed or easily distracted by a lot of stimuli, and how sometimes we have difficulty judging distances and speeds of other vehicles to the point that people over the age of 75 are involved in a lot more car crashes. And as we get that age, we don't survive those crashes nearly as well. So we need to be able to do things to make ourselves a little bit safer as we go along. Here is just one more slide. I'm hoping you've been reading as I've been talking. Some of the things you may notice as you're driving, that you're having the length or the strength and the flexibility to not brake as well. You may not even know if your foot's on the gas or the brake. I think the one that we'll really talk about today is the ability to turn your head to check traffic, because one of the things we recognize is that many times we don't respond to traffic situations nearly as well as we should, and we need to be able to do that. Here's some other unsafe driving behaviors that may clue you in that either yourself or someone else is maybe having difficulties. And the most common ones that we're seeing that are causing the most number of crashes are those left-hand turns, getting into the correct lanes, turning in front of traffic that's oncoming. So these are some of the things we'll talk about today as we mention how we can be a safer driver. And that's kind of our clue to think about. So one of the things that the one slide that I wanted to for sure bring back from last time was the 7 to-dos before you drive. And those are some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Planning ahead, asking, is it safer to drive, exercises that you can do, distractions you may run into, how to fit in your vehicle a little bit better. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the medications that you may run into that can affect your ability to drive. So let's just dive into some of these real quickly. The first one is if you're going somewhere that you're not familiar with, plan ahead. know what your route looks like. You can even Google where you're going. I do this frequently, especially because I travel all around Minnesota to talk about senior driver safety. I will actually put the address of where I'm supposed to go in, and I will Google it. And even crazily enough, you can put it into a satellite mode, and you can actually see what the landmarks are along the road, depending upon when's the last time that they took the pictures of the topographical map. So for instance, sometimes I'll know that there's a McDonald's on the corner where I'm going to turn, and it's my landmark, and hopefully that McDonald's is still there. One of the other things is that if you're going to be taking a long trip, make sure that other people know where you're going and when you should be there, so that if you don't show up, someone can check on you in case something bad happened. And it's not to be a forebearer of doom, but we do know that sometimes stuff happens, and it's nice to have someone else to check in on you. Having a working phone is another thing to be able to get help if necessary. And obviously a lot of folks have Siri to help direct them. Siri's always readjusting, take a turn here, take a turn there. Oh, you missed your turn. Well, go up this one and take another turn. But have ways to call for help and help you from getting lost. Those are some things to think about when you're driving your vehicle, to just be planning ahead. The other thing you want to think about when you're asking yourself, is it safe for me to drive, is what are the weather conditions? Should you actually be out there driving? As Debbie said, I'm in Minnesota, so there are times we have to think about, should I be driving in that blizzard? And sure, I can drive in a blizzard. I've driven in blizzards many times, going to the emergency department to work at dark 30 in the morning. But if it's not safe weather-wise, just stay home, and that way you don't have to worry about getting in a crash. The other one many of you may have recognized is if it's going to be dark, often dark and rain, and that's the two bad combinations, is really hard to see when you're driving. And you may want to not do whatever it is. Make your plans so that it's safe when you're driving. An example I'll use is my friend and I used to get together for dinner in the evening. Now we get together for lunch and breakfast because we can see better. And we had to kind of chuckle one day because it was like, when do you want to get together? She's, well, I can't drive at night anymore as well as I used to, especially if I'm coming up to the cities. So can we get together for lunch? So it sounds like, well, I'm being weak. Actually, it's a better plan how to be safer. The other thing you may even want to figure out is their road construction. What we're finding is road construction is often, I hate to say the word deadly, but it is distracting for those of us who have too many distractions with what's going on. So know where your route, know if there's an alternate route, know that if you're going through road construction, you may want to be extra careful. And I do know that I speak with a lot of our road construction folks as part of the Minnesota Towards Zero Death program, where we work to decrease injuries. And our guys on the road say that's their biggest fear, is encountering someone who is becoming distracted by the amount of construction that's going on. We're going to talk a little bit more about medications, but I'll bet you've got a question for me.
I do actually, yes. Yeah, and you, like you just said, you're going to be talking about more about medications because you did talk about that last time. So, I'm just very interested, and I'm sure the viewers out there are interested in what type of medications that can impair our driving.
Exactly. So this is the slide from the last time that we were there, where we asked, is it safe for me to drive? And what we do know is that as we age, we're more likely to be taking medications. And many of those medications right on the bottle say, do not drive when taking this medication. And in fact, I realized as I looked at this list and I looked at the next list, we're missing a big one, and that's your diabetic medications. But we know pain meds and sleeping pills, those are pretty we know that those make us sleepy. But how often do we think about muscle relaxers, medications for nausea? They can cause drowsiness. Eye drops are actually absorbed through, the medication is absorbed through the eyes. A lot of people think, well, it just makes my eye blurry because I've got a drop in it. The reality of it is eye drops have medication in them, and they can change how you're thinking and how you're working. I still remember one person who had eye drops put in his eyes for a procedure and totally passed out. And it wasn't because they were scared of eye drops, but because it had actually, the medication had dropped the person's blood pressure and heart rate enough that they had lost consciousness. So most of the eye drops we have out there aren't going to do this, but it's something to kind of be aware of. And a lot of folks probably don't realize blood pressure medicine can drop their blood pressure enough that it makes them not able to think appropriately and drive appropriately. And same thing can happen with heart medications if it drops your heart rate. And the key with being able to drive a car is you need to be alert enough to drive a car. And if your heart rate or your blood pressure drop, you may not be alert enough. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden I cannot control my vehicle. And that's the key thing to think about. So like the overall, any medication that could cause drowsiness or blurred vision or dizziness or relaxed muscle are something to worry about. And that includes not only the prescription medications, and here's a short list that I got from the CDC, but they just reminded us that medications, if you're like on Prozac or Elavil, or if you're taking Xanax, or if you're taking like Ambien, or even Benadryl, a lot of people think, well, Benadryl is a pretty safe drug, but the reality of it is that can make you unable to control your vehicle. A lot of the blood pressure medicines can make it so that you're not able to manage your vehicle well enough. Muscle relaxers, as we kind of mentioned, and then any of your antipsychotic medications. Now, this is typically a list that your pharmacist could tell you about and talk to you a little bit more about. The challenge is often we go to the store and we buy over-the-counter medications, and we think, well, because they're over-the-counter and I don't need a prescription, it's not going to affect us. But if you think about your cold medications, if you think about your over-the-counter sleeping medications, if you think about your allergy medications, Benadryl shows up here again because Benadryl can be bought over the counter. But even things like your Dimetap, you can buy hydroxyzine in many of your over-the-counter meds, anti-dizzy pills like Antivert. My sister takes that all of the time. Makes her sleepy. The Zyrtec or the Allegra or the Claritin are all medications that can cause dizziness. They can also cause sleepiness. And if you're not aware of this when you take the medicine and all of a sudden you're out on the road, you're not reacting as well as you should. I'm not sure how many people even think about the Imodium that they take for diarrhea that you can buy over the counter. That also will cause you to be either a little sleepy or can cause some dizziness. If you do a lot of stimulants, those stay awake drugs, they can make you jumpy and not drive nearly as well either. So like caffeine, I know most of us survive on caffeine as I pull up my cup of caffeine, but it is one of those things to consider. How is it making you? Sudafed is another drug. And I realize a lot of us don't take these meds because we're on blood pressure medicine, but those are some things to think about. And then let's switch over to the other side of the slide and think about your herbals. Medications like the melatonin or the valerian or the St. John's wort or the lavender or the chamomile or the GABA, all of those medications are designed to make you sleepy. So the last thing you want to be doing is talking or taking those when you're out driving. And I figured I didn't say cannabidiol or CBD because I put a whole slide in because in my state, it just became legal as of this morning to have marijuana in your possession. And I looked and it sounded like it was the same thing maybe in your state. It's legal in many states. Marijuana, cannabis, CBD, THC are all different medications that ultimately impair, and it truly is impair your judgment. Sometimes it makes you more alert and like hyper, and some of it will make you more sleepy. But what we do know is that it affects how well people control their vehicles. And that impairment can last up to 12 hours. And the challenge with many of these, and you can see pictures of them, is that the oral form of cannabis will often take up to 45 minutes before you feel it. So the challenge we're finding is that many people take a gummy and 15 minutes later, it doesn't feel like it's affecting. So they take another gummy. And what is happening is in an hour, they are so sleepy or they're so hyped up that they're not making good decisions. And we're learning a lot about how cannabis can affect us. So it's just a caution that if you are smoking or toking or ingesting, be very cautious with cannabis. I'm not for or against it because there's some benefits and non-benefits, but know that it can affect how you drive. And they are coming up with ways to test for this. So be on your lookout. Also be aware alcohol is commonly mixed with cannabis, and that the combination of the two really affect ability to drive safely. So it's kind of one of those things I would always be very, very careful about, and probably avoid taking it until you know how it affects you, as long as a half an hour to 45 minutes, even an hour out, because it may just be kicking in as you're busy trying to hit that busy intersection.
Wow, I appreciate that slide. I really do. Now, moving right along, are there any type of self-assessment type ways that a person can determine if they are safe to drive?
Yeah, in fact, there's the simple one that just is it safe for me to drive now? You can just ask yourself these questions. This is one of the ways to do it, and I call it the 7 Ds. Have you been drinking? Have you been doing drugs? Are you distracted? Are you disoriented? Are you distressed? Are you drowsy? Or don't feel well? That's one of the ways to think about it. Another one is, and I ran across this in my AAA newsletter that I got, and they were saying, consider your ability and frame of mind. Is it safe for me to drive now? And they said, answer yes or no to these questions. I get honked at or passed a lot, and I thought, oh, okay. Or do I stop for green lights and go through red ones? A story I could share with that is I still remember driving to a meeting, and I stopped at a stop sign, and I don't know where my brain was, but I just kept waiting for that stop sign to turn green, and it just didn't turn green. It was like, oh, wait a minute, you silly girl. That stop sign's not going to change. Look both ways and then go. But I mean, that's where your brain sometimes goes, is it's either A, you're really busy. So this is not always just senior stuff, but as we become older, these things happen more frequently. The other question you can ask, do I find myself drifting, wheezing, weaving, kissing the curb, or does your car keep alarming because you're crossing the lines or you're weaving too much? Do you find yourself yelling at other drivers because you don't like the way they're driving, or you're making those gestures? But those are some things that clue to you that is either A, they're doing things you don't like, or B, maybe you're doing things that are making them unhappy. Are cars suddenly appearing from nowhere? That's a really scary one, because what has happened is your blind spot has gotten bigger and you're not noticing things. So what are you doing to make sure your blind spot is smaller so you're not getting hit by someone else? And I had this happen just not all that long ago, and where I was at a T road. It was like I was going to enter onto a road where everybody was going. They were going 70 miles an hour, and all of a sudden there was another vehicle, and it's like, where did he come from? Because I hadn't seen him earlier. And with the high speeds we're seeing, this is a risk for all of us. Probably your best clue is if your family or friends won't ride with you. So those are some questions to ask yourself. And you might ask, are there other assessments? Yeah. Well, there's some official ones. So one of the ones that I give out to my seniors when I go out and I teach them is this from the AAA group. And I was lucky enough to get a bunch of hard copies. This can be downloaded online, and it talks about check your performance, and it's a self-rating tool. And I'm actually going to hit the slide one more time. You can see where it comes from. If you just go into AAA and look for check your 65 plus, check your driving. But what it does is it provides a self-assessment as well as a scoring tool. And they ask questions about, am I wearing my seat belt? How well can I see what's going on? Things like that. And tells you if you are a safe driver, or maybe you should take some actions to become more safe, or if you really are to the point that maybe you should consider, should I be driving my vehicle as well? So AAA has one, but honestly, NHTSA has a self-assessment test. So does AARP have a self-assessment test. And you can go to them, and if you just go in like AARP self-assessment, typically these pop right back up. And I know that links on a PowerPoint are usually not a lot of help, but in the long run, this is something that we certainly could, you can stop the slide long enough to write them down. Or if you just put in NHTSA self-assessment or AARP self-assessment or AAA self-assessment, those are some things that would definitely help you decide, am I a safe driver? Or you can go back to the simple, ask myself those questions, what's going on with folks?
Yeah, good question. So last time you talked about exercising, how important that is. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
You bet. Because to me, that's the key. Remember, we talked about how when you're driving, you need strength and flexibility. And some of the studies have shown that 20 minutes of exercise every day has been helpful. Now, it's interesting. Recently, I've been reading articles that say it may not help cognition, but it does help the flexibility. So exercising is important. We'll talk about what to do related to exercising your cognition. But also keep in mind, if you're exercising and it's causing pain, it's probably you need to back off. You should probably check with your doctor before you do any really strenuous exercise, and you really don't want to overdo exercises. I understand the new exercise is pickleball, but I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the ones that the Hartford Foundation, and if you put in Hartford and put exercises for mature drivers, I kind of took the form that they gave us, and then I ended up drawing some new pictures because I wasn't allowed to break apart the form that they had, but they have an awesome 2-page handout on exercises you can do specifically for flexibility and strength when you're driving. So the first two that I put together, you basically, it's a case of turning your head to the left and to the right, as well as putting your head down and putting your head back, and then bringing it forward. And when you're seated, all of those things talk about seated comfortably, so you're stable, etc. These really help you so that you can check that blind spot a lot better. So neck flexibility, and I find a lot of folks don't turn their neck or their head far enough so that they're actually looking over their shoulders. So increasing this slowly and increasing your flexibility there is a really good idea. But it also can put pressure on your carotid arteries. So if it makes you dizzy and lightheaded, you need to check with your doc before you do that, because it's possible to cut the circulation to your brain off, and that would not be a good thing. The other one that is very helpful, they said, is to keep in mind that you want your wrists and your fingers to be flexible. So basically, you're sitting again, and what you just simply want to do is spread out your fingers and close your fingers. Spread out your fingers and close your fingers. And I should say, bring your wrists back and bring your wrists forward. Back and forward. And one of the things that I could mention later, but I'll mention now, is a lot of these exercises I do while I'm sitting at stoplights. It helps keep me flexible while I'm actually driving, or I can do them while I'm watching television as well. This one I had to put whole because what I wanted to do is make sure that you could see the arching of the back towards the front, and then arching of the back. The third picture doesn't show it nearly as well. You actually want to kind of get in a hunched position. So I thought about, if you ever watched your cat or your dog stretch, you know how they kind of arch really long and then they hunch up really tall. That's kind of what you can do. And you can do this in your vehicle as well. And you really only need to do it for like 4 or 5 times, but ultimately loosen up those back muscles a little bit, because ultimately that helps you sit in your vehicle a little bit straighter and makes you a little bit more flexible. The shoulder stretch, basically this one, it's a little hard to tell from the picture, but if you think about what you want to do is, if you drop your arms at your side, ultimately you just want to have your hand, the palms facing backwards. You can't see my palms. My palms are facing backwards. But ultimately what I'm going to do is reach behind me and just stretch my arms behind me and then hunch my shoulders backwards. And then I'm going to bring them forward. So ultimately you're stretching your arms back and forth is one of those ones that strengthen your back muscles. And then the other one in this particular one is you start out straight, basically just turning and twisting your whole body. First, you can do the left, or then you can do the right, or you can just do all lefts and then do all rights. But ultimately, getting that torso twisting and stretching, you'll feel that with these two, you'll feel in your ribs, you'll feel the stretch, and then you'll feel in your back and the stretch. But these are all good things to just get you stretched out and loosened up. So when I put the picture of the kitty originally, I also had a thing that says stretch before you go. These are all just simply stretches. These aren't big time exercises. These are good stretches. They're even good, like if you're going to go out and do some work in the yard, or you're going to do some running or something, or play some pickleball. These are good stretches to think about. The next two exercises are good to help you when you're using your pedals in your car. The first one is just simply a case of sitting in your chair and then bending your foot up, and then bending your foot down and pointing your toes. Bend your foot up so your toes are pointed towards your body, and then bend your foot down so that you're pointing your toes. And what you're doing is increasing your ankle strength. And once you've got that done, the other one you want to think about is just simply sitting comfortably in your chair, lifting your leg up and then putting your leg down, lifting your leg up, putting your leg down. You're strengthening your thigh muscles as you do that. And those will help you when you're going from gas to brake and brake to gas. So hopefully some exercises that will make you a lot more limber. The last one, I was watching a TV show and I'm watching like 3 people do this. Basically, if you grab your elbow and then just bring your arm around, you're stretching that back again, then relaxing, stretching your back again, and then you can bring your elbow this way and bring your elbow around and then relax. All good flexibility and muscle strengthening things as you're doing. And each of these, as you do them, when you do the stretch, hold it for like 5 seconds and then relax every one of these. And what that happens is it creates that little bit of a pull. But again, do them gently and increase the numbers as you do them more and more and more. And don't ever overdo it. And ultimately, you'll find that you will feel a lot more limber when you get up. If you'd rather do these when you're in bed before you get out of bed, you can do that too. So they're good stretching exercises, but believe it or not, they're good exercises for you to when you're driving. I think this is the last one that I have here. And this is the one that where you simply think about, and this is one I need to hang on to a chair because I'm not really good with one leg. But basically what you'd like to do is kick your leg out to the side. So just a little gentle kick out to the side, bring it back in. Get it out to the side a little bit. Probably the easiest way to describe it is pretend you're kicking a ball or moving a ball or kicking stuff out of the way, and do it with your right leg and do it with your left leg. And it says raises. Well, it's not really like raises. It's like you pick your foot off the floor. Instead of shuffling it, you're actually picking your foot up and kicking things that are going on, because ultimately these help, number one, your balance, but number two, it's that sideway motion of your legs. So it corrects your inner thighs as well as your balance with that. So a bunch of different exercises that they recommended. This is the last one. And this is the one that I definitely need a chair to do, because if I try to squat down as if I think I'm going to sit in a chair, I'm sure I'm going to lose my balance and fall on my butt. But this will help strengthen your thigh muscles as well, the front ones as well as the back ones. And if you're hanging on, it helps you with your balance. But ultimately, those squats, this is probably the one that's the toughest if you've got bad knees. But I'll lay you odds that when I go to get my knee fixed shortly, this is the one they're going to tell me I need to practice the most, because I need to get the strength back in my legs. And you'll find these really help when you start going up and down stairs more, because they strengthen those muscles that you use. So when you're getting up out of a chair, that's another way to practice this one, and that's the part in the red. It's just basically when you get out of your chair, instead of using your arms of the chair to stand to push you up, use your legs to push you up. And what you do there as you're sitting down and getting up, you're actually strengthening those muscles in your legs. So a different exercise to think about, but all exercises to consider. And what you notice here is that, and there's the Hartford Mature exercise sheet that you can go to the main page, and the one on the right hand side is the one that you can actually, where you can go to, it's exercises for mature drivers, to pull that sheet down. But you can do these while you're watching TV mostly, so it makes it easy to do, and makes it a little bit better for you driving, because remember earlier I said you need to be strong and flexible when you're driving out there. The other part of you that needs to be strong and flexible is your cognitive skills. And I recently was doing an evaluation with a gal for her work, and she says, I'm not going to have you do any of these little tests. She says, because you're busy doing research projects, so you probably are busy exercising your brain well enough. But if you're finding you're not doing things like crossword puzzles or Sudoku or mazes or reading the newspaper every day or things like that, you may want to actually get one of those books. Get a maze book. get a word search book, any of those things to exercise your brain, because what we do know is that brain exercises helps our brain health, and it helps us solve problems when we're out on the road. So that, like, for instance, when you come across road construction, you're used to solving a problem, and that's what these do. The other thing, even though it's not a puzzle, or maybe it's a puzzle to get in to see your doctor, but make sure your seeing and your hearing is good. Because one of the things we do know is that if we're having trouble seeing or hearing, we can't process the information. And the key is not only the sensory input, but the processing it and then the response to it. So these are all things that can affect our driving a little bit. Are you feeling sweaty?
Yes. Oh my God. You know, I love all the exercises because it, in a way, breaks down all the different mechanics that the body uses to get in the car, to drive the car, and also to get out of the car. So I definitely will have to download that and show it in one of my in the programs that I offer. But what other ways can you suggest for us to increase our driving safety?
Oh, great. And I love your analogy that getting in, driving, and getting out. I guess I knew that, but I had never thought to put it. I need to put that on this slide. Thank you. So some of the other things to think about: how do I know when I'm in my vehicle? Am I being safe when I drive? So I borrowed this slide. One of my law enforcement officers was using it as he was teaching his seniors, but I just had to chuckle it. No, officer, I wasn't texting while I was driving, but he was doing the brain thing. He's got crossword puzzles there, but unfortunately he's doing a lot of the distractions. And most people think phone. They hear the word distraction and they think the word phone. But what we've really found is food. And I had to put fries in there because that is my distraction when I'm driving. It's like I get through the drive-through and the fries never make it home. The hamburger is still always in the bag, but the fries there. And there are times when you're so busy getting a fry, you're not paying attention. Fluids, it could be anything from coffee to your tea or your malt that you're trying to spoon up when you're driving as well. I hated to put the word friends on there, but the reality of it is we often find that when there's a lot of people jabbering in the car, you decided to get involved in the conversation as well. And instead of paying attention to the road, you're busy conversing. And I don't know that there's a lot of data on seniors and crashes with distractive talking, but we do know there's a lot with kids because they're busy Snapchatting and all of those other things, showing what they're doing in the vehicle, and it's all right before the crash happens. In fact, sometimes they actually have a picture of the crash taking place. So friends are one of those things. Yes, you want to be in the vehicle with friends to help you, but you also want to be careful that you're paying attention to your driving. I was trying to think of some other F's. And photographing, we've actually had people taking videos and pictures while they're driving. I'm not sure how they're doing that. Freshening up makeup and fiddling with stuff. The craziest thing I've heard, and I couldn't find a picture of it or I'd have put it on there. One of my law enforcement guys actually said that they found a guy busy practicing his tuba while he was driving. It's just like, oh my goodness. So to be, and shaving is a common one. They said people are busy shaving and putting on eye makeup and all of this other stuff. So truly when you're driving and you're not doing any of that other stuff. So that's the first thing I would think about is how to be safe in the vehicle. But the other things to think about is, are you wearing your seatbelt correctly? And one of the things that we frequently find our seniors are not keen on is wearing their seatbelt correctly if they wear it at all. Although the studies have shown more seniors wear their seatbelts than younger folks. But the key there is it needs to go over your shoulder and not under your arm. And a lot of people are nervous about like their pacemakers or it feels uncomfortable. The key is to make sure that your seatbelt is adjusted correctly. And that little arrow points to a spot. If you're driving, there's actually a clip in most vehicles where you can adjust that seatbelt so it comes across your shoulder blade and then it connects in the clip. The part that goes over your waist, and if any of you are like me, I have that little bulge in my belly. It needs to go under the bulge, not over the bulge. That's what gives you the best protection because it needs to be against your hip bones. If you're wearing it under your arm and if you're wearing it over your bulge, bulge, what you'll find happening is it's not protecting you as an older person. And one of the things we know is that as we age, our bones get more fragile. And so we're at a higher risk of broken bones in our neck and in our pelvis if we're not wearing our seatbelt correctly. The other thing that can happen is if we wear it across our belly button, which is too high, what will happen is it actually can cause our injury to our abdominal organs. So we want to make sure we wear our seatbelt correctly when we're driving. And so I mentioned you can adjust your seatbelt. And so it may be that if mom is short, she needs to have the seatbelt adjusted shorter. And if dad is taller, he needs to adjust it up. And they actually need to adjust where that seatbelt comes across them. You don't want to come across your neck, because you can decapitate yourself, but it should come across your shoulder. If you're worried about your pacemaker, there is a pad that you can actually buy or make. You could probably run a pair of folded up socks that sits right where your pacemaker is. But most pacemakers are pretty well inserted nowadays, so it's not going to hurt your pacemaker if your seatbelt stops. The other really cool part about seatbelts now is that they have actually, in the newer vehicles, fix them so that they give a teeny bit for us older drivers with more fragile bones. It used to be that seatbelts caused fractures because they were so stiff, but now there's a little bit of a give. They've come up with some really great mechanisms in them. So if you wear your seatbelt correctly, it will do a good job of protecting you. Not 100%. But it'll keep you from dying, which is always the good outcome related to that. And when you look at that as well, it's, am I in the safest position when I drive? And to me, this is key. You can see this fella, he's sitting really nicely. His seat positioning is good. His back is against the seat. His head is right in front of the part of the seat where you your headrest. That headrest will keep you, when you get in a crash, from your neck going like this, and that hyperextension injury, you will actually hit that headrest if it's positioned in the right place. The other thing we know is that we need to be at least 10 inches from the steering wheel. It gives you enough space so that you can go forward a little bit and move back. It also gives enough space for the airbag. And I'm going to have another slide in just a second to talk about airbags, but we do know that you need to be at least 10 inches away. And then you need to start figuring out, can I now reach the pedals? I've seen people that are so short they can't reach the pedals. So there's a couple of things to think about. One is you can actually often adjust where your steering wheel is in. The other thing you can often do is get pedal extenders. Don't be using canes or sticks to drive with. And we've actually seen pictures of that, but actually make sure you fit in your vehicle as you're looking at. The other thing to consider, and here's the 3-inch rule, and you could kind of see the lines, make sure you can actually see over the steering wheel, not through the steering wheel. And that means you may need to adjust your seat upward. Now, the good news is I'm seeing a lot of car manufacturer dealers, maybe I should say car dealers, will actually make sure the person who buys the car fits in the car, but they should make sure that all the drivers fit in that vehicle. So if there's like a position 1, position 2, adjust it that way. Or if there's not, adjust it so that you can fit in that vehicle the way that you're supposed to. To kind of go with that, we have changed. Many of us learned 10 and 2. When we were doing the steering wheel, what we found is 10 and 2, when the airbag goes off, if you get in a front end collision, it breaks your thumbs off. So the recommendation now is down at, what is this, 4 and like 8 to drive this way, or at least on the sides. And if you don't like that, at least keep your thumbs from being wrapped around the steering wheel, because that force will blow your arms off and will fracture those thumbs. The other thing is that if you're up like this, you can get burns when that airbag goes off. That airbag is a lifesaver, but it can cause some injuries if we're not in our vehicle correctly. And that's why the 10-inch rule is important related to this. The other thing you can do is adjust your mirrors to avoid that blind spot. And you need to be able, when you look out through the rear view mirror, see the entire back window. And then you want to adjust your side mirrors so that you can see the back corner of your vehicle, and you can kind of see a picture of that there. But you may even want to, and I'll talk about CarFit in a few minutes, if you actually kind of lean over and almost put your head against the window and then adjust your mirror, you will get the biggest picture of what's going on behind you. To adjust your lateral mirror, lean over till you're almost over the center console, and then adjust that passenger mirror. And what you'll find is it adjusts your blind spot so that it's so much bigger. And here's just a picture of how much more visible it is. Typically, about the time you lose the vehicle coming up along the side of you is just about where hopefully our exercises helped you to see that blind spot. So it's not, you can't always count on the mirror completely, but what you'll find is if you adjust the lateral part or your side mirrors, you'll actually get a much bigger, oh my God, there's somebody coming on this side. And they're suddenly not coming out of the middle of nowhere on you. I will say that as I've done CarFit, I have seen some people who actually have that extra little mirror down in the bottom corner. So it's learning how to use your mirrors will really help you to find a lot of those other vehicles and make you feel a lot safer out there. The other thing, not like this car. You don't want this car. The other thing is just make sure your vehicle's in good shape. Everything's working the way they are, and probably wipers are the biggest thing. I have to chuckle when we teach CarFit. We actually have people blow their horn to make sure they A, know where it is, and B, how it sounds when they don't do it. And I again remind you to know your route and know if it's safe to drive out there, so that you're not getting into situations where you need to use emergency things related with that. And the last thing I would recommend with improving safety in your vehicle is attend a road safety class or an accident prevention class. And it's not like any of these guys are giving me any money to promote like AARP or AAA or the National Safety Council. We used to call them the 55 Alive class. But a lot of these, if you take the class, you get a discount on your insurance. So I don't know if that happens in Massachusetts, but I know that it does happen in Minnesota. So look for those out there. And what they do is they remind you of the new rules of the road. The laws have changed so much since I learned how to drive. And it's nice to get out there and find out some of those things. And then CarFit. If you see an ad for a CarFit, a lot of the things I just described, they will go through that with you. So that might be one of the things I think about.
Yeah. I'd love to learn more about CarFit and how we can bring it back. I'm not sure if they have it in Massachusetts. They probably did here and there, but before COVID, but then COVID happened. And as you mentioned, that kind of, stopped a little bit because of the, the social distancing that we had to do. So
Exactly. CarFit is an awesome thing that if you can find it. And one of the easiest ways is if you just go to car and you actually have to put the -fit.org in. Somebody else owned the CarFit's logo. So they had to put the hyphen in. But if you go there, it will give you where a CarFit event is being held throughout the whole United States. They have an online version of it as well. So if you can't find an in-person one, you can actually go through CarFit. But what happens is if you go to an event, there will be people like me. There you can see in my little safety vest with my clipboard at one of the events we held. And we go through a list to make sure that you are wearing your seatbelt right. You've got your seat height right. You've got your head restraint correct. If you're actually 3 inches over the steering wheel and 10 inches from the steering wheel, and then we help you adjust your mirrors, and we make sure you know where your emergency lights and your horn are. And our whole goal is to make sure that you fit in your vehicle so that you're at the safest. I put their logo up there, and you might say, well, what are all of those different, AOTA, AAA, and ARP? It was actually designed by occupational therapy people. And these folks will often, and actually are supposed to be at an event, although sometimes we will have an event without them. But the benefit of an occupational therapist, and this is where I can't promote a group as much as I can, they can give you ideas, ways to be safer in the vehicle. Like, for instance, if you're just too short They can help you figure out how to make your seat higher. They've got devices that will do that. We laugh. If you have trouble getting in and out of your vehicle, they have a device that it's kind of like a lazy Susan for your butt. And so you can actually twirl and you can get out a little bit more easily. Or they talk about the pedal extenders. They talk about knobs you can put on your steering wheel so you can grab them. Because if your hand, it can't get around the steering wheel, it might be able to grab a knob a little bit better. So they have a lot of really good devices that will help us be safer drivers. So it was one of their events that they were doing. It's one of the programs they did. And as a nurse, I butted in and said, can I get involved? And they said, yeah, absolutely. We'd love to have you. So we're starting to train nurses how to be car fit technicians. And if you want to do that, they will train you. And you don't have to run the event like I have to now or get to. But it is one of those things that are out there. And so don't be afraid of them. We're not there to take away your keys. We're really there to help make you safer.
I love it. I love it. So any other safety hints? Any last minute safety hints you got for us?
Oh, I have so many. But my favorite ones are the ones that remind us what to be careful with. I love to go back. Well, it's sad sometimes to go back and look at the contributing factors to crashes in those of us over 65. But the number one, and on the bottom here, I said the Minnesota crash facts from 2019. Well, I guess what? I just checked the 2022 and they're just as bad. I checked the national crash facts from the insurance group, the IIHS group, and they found it was failure to yield. And it was like 3 times everybody younger. If the older we got, the more likely we were failing to yield and getting in a crash. We were improperly turning and getting into a crash. We were improperly merging and getting into a crash. And ultimately what happens is we have trouble making either that left turn or recognizing who's coming from our right side, who's coming from our left side, or who's coming at us. And what happens is we pull out because our judgment is off a little bit, and it takes us a little bit longer to get that car moving. And what happens is we end up getting in a crash. And the bad news is that those of us, it's between 65 and 75, we're still a little resilient to crashes. But the statistics are showing like from 75 and up, you get in a crash, you have a really high risk of not only an injury, but an injury that ultimately will lead to your death. And that sounds like such a downer. But to me, it's a reason to be a safer driver, to think of some of the things that I can do to be a little bit safer for myself. And more importantly, the other people around me. Who else got involved in the crash? Is there somebody in my vehicle that's going to be hurt? The statistics don't always say if it's the driver or the passenger, but is it another person in my vehicle that got hurt? Or is it the person that was in the vehicle coming towards me that I crashed into that got hurt? So if we want to be kind to others, as well as take care of ourselves, we want to make sure that we're careful when we're driving. And some of the options are just simply, instead of doing that left-hand turn, and you will find a lot of companies are now recommending that their delivery people do this. If it's possible, make 3 rights instead of a left. And yeah, that last go through the intersection puts you at risk again, but those 3 rights instead of a left puts you at less of a chance of making that left-hand turn in front of a vehicle coming at you. And to kind of go along with this, in Massachusetts, do you have that left blinking arrow, that yellow one?
From time to time, not that often, but yeah, we have the yellow blinking, sometimes the blinking red. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is the one that makes me the most nervous, because there's too many things going on here, because you're trying to watch the green one to make sure that it's still safe to go. But the yellow one, does that mean caution? It does mean caution, you can go. Or is it caution, it's going to turn red? The key here with this one is if you can see it's safe to make that left turn on that flashing arrow, which is good, you don't have to wait for the green one. It's knowing your reaction time. Knowing how long it takes you to take your foot from the brake over to the gas, push down on the gas and get the car going. And I've even noticed as I get a little bit older, it takes me longer. I don't have those tire burning starts anymore. It's slower to get the car going. So know how long it takes you to get your vehicle going and in front of that vehicle. And if you don't think it's going to be safe, it's better to wait until you actually have that green arrow rather than going, oh, I'm going to try that yellow one. So it's a nice feature because sometimes you can take a left turn when there's no traffic, but sometimes if you don't move fast enough, you ultimately end up making that left turn right in front of somebody else.
Joni, quick question. Has that been timed, the reactionary time for people to move their foot from the gas to the brake? Is there like a range of time that when somebody, so that people will know, okay, I'm within that range, I can, still have, I can still move my foot fast enough to maneuver the car. If it's too long, then, it might make people want to think, oh, I need to do more exercises, or maybe it's time for me to give up my keys.
Okay. Well, and that's an interesting, what would you call it? From one to the other. So it's going to depend on the speed in the street. So each one is a little bit different. We do know reacting will often take twice as long for like someone who's like 55 and older than like say a 20-year-old, just simply because their reaction time is more quick. But if you've got somebody who's coming at you at 30 miles an hour, you're going to have a little bit longer time than if somebody's coming you at 70 miles an hour. So between depth perception and judgment and the other vehicle speeds, there's not an exact science answer to that. But the recognition that if they look like they're coming fast, you may want to wait. If they look like they're coming more slowly, and then you just hope that they don't, all of a sudden hit the gas and start coming more quickly at you. When you said, do we do more exercises or give up the keys? Maybe it's not that extreme. It's maybe, do more exercises. But the other one to think about is, well, it's a suggestion that you turn. It's not a you have to turn if it's blinking yellow. So if you've got a green, go ahead and do it. But if you've got a blinking yellow or red, obviously red, you'd stop. But blinking yellow, think, what? Maybe I'm not going to go. And too bad if the guy behind me is honking. Too bad. You're going to be safe rather than sorry. But that's a great question because it's one of those ones. What is the timing? They have tried to do timing. And it's basically, they just know that it's taking longer, but they don't have an exact number of seconds as how much longer each of us takes and what's the bad time. Merging was the other one. The good news is basically you just have to kind of, it depends upon your traffic situation. Here, if I'm merging out in the rural area, it's not as bad. I just make sure my mirrors are adjusted correctly. So we know where our blind spots are. But the other one is to practice that. It's also know that theoretically you're supposed to be able to, do you zipper merge in your state? I've been told we were the most reticent to zipper. Minnesota's don't zipper real good. How about in Massachusetts?
Oh yeah, we have to. There's so much road construction. And, there's some lanes that go down from like 3 to 2.
Exactly.
So you have to really be able to kind of, it's all timing.
It truly is. And if you're polite, you let people zipper merge. Minnesota has 2 seasons. It's winter and road construction. I don't know about your state. That's what it is. The key there is you just need to, with simple merging, like you're getting onto the freeway, that's a commonplace. It's just a case of you need to let people know you're coming, look for a spot and start accelerating and getting on in so that you don't cause crashes behind you. With zippers, at least you kind of have an idea that you know that you're doing that merging. And here's where you probably want to decrease the number of distractions as much as possible out there. Now, did I understand you? Do you call them rotaries?
Yes, we do.
Yeah, yes. we call them a swear word roundabouts in Minnesota. Once somebody gets used to roundabouts, they're really not so bad. But getting used to them sometimes causes some challenges. But the thing that I like, somebody explained once, if you just think about if you're driving into the roundabout, you just got to make sure there's nobody coming at you. Pretend you're making a right turn. And if you're going to go through, it's just another right turn. And if you're going to go all the way around, it's just another right turn. It's just a series of potential right turns. And the key is just follow the flow and pop on out. But for some reason, a lot of our seniors tend to avoid roundabouts because they say that they're too confusing. But try them. The reality of it is they're not all that bad. And the reason we do roundabouts is because what we have found is it avoids this. They're just so much safer. When we were doing intersections, we were doing what we call a T-bone crash. As opposed to when we do roundabouts, we do a glancing blow. And what I wanted to do was show you the inside of a vehicle. When you do a roundabout, if you get crashed into, the airbags will generally protect you all around. If you're T-boned, if you can see the crash dummy, what would happen is if they were hit on that driver's side, he would fly over laterally, and your airbag does not protect your neck when you're going side to side. It really helps you just from hitting the window or from hitting the steering wheel, and your headrest protects you if you do a front end or a back end collision. So the roundabouts added to the airbags make us a lot safer. So even though we want to call them a swear word, roundabout or rotary, they're actually a safer thing to think about.
Wow, that's fascinating. It makes sense. And, when I was first driving many moons ago, I used to get intimidated by the roundabouts or rotaries because it just seemed dizzying. It was very dizzying for me. And then I missed my spot. Then I realized, hey, I can just keep going around and around until I get it the right way.
Exactly. Well, and the other thing is what a lot of folks don't realize is that you automatically slow down when you go into a rotary. And what we do know is the slower your vehicle is going, the less impact on your body and the better it is for you to survive those crashes. So they're actually a good, safe thing. I could talk forever, but what I think I'm going to just do is restate what we said at the very beginning, recognizing that as we age, we get a little slower, we get a little bit more fragile, we get a little less flexible. So we need to take some action to be able to continue to keep driving. And ultimately, if we plan ahead where we're going to be safer, if we ask ourselves, am I in a safe frame of mind to drive right now? Am I exercising those muscles so that I'm strong enough and flexible enough to drive and my brain is strong enough to do that? Am I limiting the amount of distractions? And am I doing things in my vehicle to make me as safe as possible? Because the good news is they're building in safety things for us, and we want to take advantage of them. We also want to make sure that if we're driving, are we doing so not impaired? And a lot of people think impaired means alcohol, but impaired is any of our medications that can make us drowsy or lose control over a vehicle. It's also the cannabis that's out there. It's just, what are the things that are we imbibing that can ultimately affect our driving? And then I would say the last thing is just think about what you would do to manage if you couldn't drive. So right now we're doing things to be safer, but start thinking about what happens if I shouldn't drive. Maybe I just shouldn't drive at night, or maybe I just shouldn't drive in the bad weather. But what if I shouldn't drive on the freeway? How am I going to get to where I'm going? I told my little brother a couple of weeks ago as I was coming back from someplace that I knew he was going to, I said, just so you know, there's road construction on that road and it's backed up like crazy. He says, thanks. He says, I'll find an alternate route. So, is there alternate ways that you could go? And maybe you can continue to drive for a longer time and still be safely driving, but then think about, how else can I get around? I was going to try to find a number to find rides, and dang, I couldn't find it. But I called my sister and she says, you know what? If you call United Way 211, they can always tell you how to get rides in your area. That was probably like, oh, and she says, if you don't like computer, calling works better, or you can go online. So it's an option to think about. The other thing I thought I would do is, there's a lot of information on this slide, but it kind of gives us a list of some of the different places that you can go for additional information. Anywhere from the occupational therapist group. Chorus is a repository of resources. And if you go to www.roadsafeseniors.org, there's a ton of stuff. And it's not just for people like you and me who help teach people how to be safe. It's also for people who want to be safe, so they can go there. The National Institute on Aging is very helpful. The National Safety Council does a class called My Car Does What? So it talks about the electronic senior vehicle. NHTSA, who's our driving people, has a lot of information. AARP does. The Hartford Agency we talked about earlier. AAA has stuff. And even the CDC has information. And on the very bottom, you can always send something to me if you want, because I have lots of stuff that you can use. And I put the Minnesota Emergency Nurses link way up in the top left-hand corner, because we have a page dedicated to older driver safety as part of our grants.
Thank you so much for, being on the program again.
It's just so fun to be able to share all of this information.